Chapter 2, verses 201 through 300. 201. All truth is in the creation and in its laws and recommendations. Therefore do not create your own and false truth in yourselves. Otherwise you are turning yourselves into people without equitableness, unfair ones, irresponsible ones, inequitable ones, and into doubters. 202. Everyone has a determination towards which they strive. Therefore compete with one another in good works, so that you complete great things wherever you may be. Combine together to perform great works, then you have the might to do and achieve everything that you strive for. However, always use and do everything in goodness, so that you do not end up as people without equitableness, unfair ones, irresponsible ones, inequitable ones. 203. And wherever you come from, turn your eyes towards the truth, so that no abnormal doubt arises in you against it, and your doings are not heedless. 204. And wherever you go, turn your eyes towards the truth, and wherever you are, also turn your face towards it there. If you do so, then the ones living in equitableness, fairness, and responsibility will have no objection towards you, excepting those amongst them who wallow in inequity, irresponsibility, unfairness, who lie and deceive and do everything to harm you. However, do not fear them, but only be afraid of denying the truth, so that goodness can be perfected in you, and so that you are rightly led. 205. Just as the proclaimers, the prophets, came to you out of your midst announcing the signs, teaching evidence of the truth and bringing them forth, so you will be cleansed from unknowledge and inequity, unfairness, irresponsibility. If you follow the teaching that is given by the proclaimers, the prophets, and by the writing of the truth, which teaches you what you need to know. 206. Therefore think about the truth that is presented and explained to you by the proclaimers, the prophets, who think of you in love. Therefore thank them, and do not be unthankful to them. 207. O you, who are knowing in the truth, search for help in the learning of the truth teaching and in patience, because truly there is a boon upon your head. Mental block equals consciousness, thoughts, feelings, and psyche. If you go forth in steadfastness. 208. And do not say about those who have been slain for the truth that they had fallen into foolishness, because truly they were in good senses. But they were not understood and were slandered due to their love for the truth by those who wallow in inequity, irresponsibility, unfairness, and truth deniers. And the ones slain for the truth were alive in their nature and in their inner world consciousness. But those who wallow in inequity, irresponsibility, unfairness, and the truth deniers were living dead. 209. Truly you will all be tested by the appearance, nature, with anxiety and fear, hunger and loss of your goods and chattels in life, and all that which is of nourishment. But when you are connected to patience, then you will surely overcome all tests, because it is part and parcel of the life for things to go up and down, for good to alternate with bad, of which there can be no doubt. The message to the patient ones is, however, that all strivings yield good fruits, and time will ultimately change everything to the good. 210. The believers say, when unfortune strikes them, that it is the will of their divinity or of their 10 gods. However, because there is no determining divinity and also no determining 10 gods, then neither their ministration nor retaliation exists, because in all things you alone are the determining factor in the carrying out of your own responsibility. 211. However, the unknowing ones and those who wallow in inequity, irresponsibility, unfairness, have fallen into belief and are looking for their salvation in divinities and 10 gods, and hoping that these will drip grace and blessing onto their heads because they believe they are rightly led. 212. Certainly, the prophets' signs, marvels, of the truth appear to be miracles, outstanding things, but they are a creation of the might of their own inner world consciousness, and therefore it is no ignominy for them to perform signs, marvels. However, those who learn the talent of giving signs from the prophets and use this for their own gain in order to dazzle and to obtain advantages, benefits, and profit from it, they are the ones who are exposing themselves to ignominy and are burdening themselves with unright. 213. And it is no ignominy for those who care for the truth and travel to places where the truth teaching is revealed, and therefore it is no ignominy, but a good work, if good is done beyond the limits of duty. And therefore it is no ignominy if help is bestowed on the truth teaching in any wise so that it can spread amongst you. However, it is not rightful to make commerce for profit out of the truth teaching, and it is also not rightful to proselytize and persuade for the truth teaching and to impose it onto the unknowing ones and to attack them in their thoughts and feelings. Human beings shall only come to the real truth through their own will, in the need of their demand and in complete freedom of their thinking and honest striving for the real truth and sense of a life. 2:14. Those wallowing in iniquity, irresponsibility, unfairness, and the unknowing ones amongst you falsify what the prophets bring in the truth teaching, in signs, marvels, evidence, and in the guideline, signposting, leading thought, when they teach it to you through word and writing, and you curse the prophets, and in hatred also the people of your kind, human beings, all around. Nevertheless, the prophets forgive you, but the people you have cursed amongst the people of your kind, human beings, do not forgive you, and curse you also. 2:15. You, however, if you feel sorry and you improve yourselves and profess yourselves open to the truth, you will be representatives of the prophets, so that you shall pass on the recognized truth to all those who ask about it. However, you shall not proclaim your wisdom unasked and not attack other people with it, such as the believers do who have become a slave to divinities and tin gods. 2:16. And if you regret your unknowledge and your iniquity, unfairness, and improve yourselves and profess yourselves open to the truth teaching, then you must forgive yourselves, because you alone are the forgiving ones for yourselves when you have found the path to the truth and freedom, to peace, to love, and to consonance, harmony, in yourselves, and have thereby created a living horde in yourselves. 2:17. Those, however, who are unknowing ones and ones wallowing in iniquity, irresponsibility, unfairness, and eke out an existence as such, they curse themselves all in all, because their present existence becomes an unjoy and, sooner or later, a torment. 2:18. But those who are distressed by unjoy and torment shall not remain so, because they shall moderate their own punishment that they have imposed on themselves, and come to recognition, if they turn to the truth of the creation and its laws and recommendations, and fulfill them. 2:19. And there is no God, no one God, and there is no tin God, no one tin God, who is favorable and benevolent, because God and tin God are inventions and lies and delusions of the brain of people of your kind, the human brain, and are of no use in any good wise whatsoever, except in evil for enslaving the people of your kind, human beings, through the mendacity of the priests serving God and tin gods, through whom their believers are subjugated and exploited. 2:20. Truly, in the creation of the firmaments, universe, and the earth roundnesses, worlds, planets, and in the change from day and night, and in the flying machines which fly through the air and the skies, and in the ships which travel over the seas, lakes and rivers carrying everything that is useful to you, and in the water, rain, that falls from the firmament and invigorates earth, and scattered over it the people of your kind, human beings, and all kinds of animals and other creatures, and in the change of the weather and the winds and the clouds which float between the firmament and earth, and the sun in the sky and the stars and the moon in the firmament at night. All of these are real signs of the truthfully creation which stands as an unmeasurable secret above all life, above all firmaments, universe, and above all earths, worlds, planets, and they are signs, evidence, for everyone who recognizes the truth and understands it, who turns to it and forms their present existence with it. 2:21. However, there are others amongst you who have set up a divinity or a tin god or an object of worship for themselves, because they are unknowing in the truth of the primal raising, creation, and love their god or tin gods or object as if it were living and truthful, and they are sick in their belief and without rationality, because they are unable to distinguish between their delusion and the truth of reality. They are malefactors, irresponsible ones against the truth, and if they could see themselves as malefactors, lawbreakers, and understand it, then they would realize the hardship and the misery and the punishment that they themselves are imposing in themselves, and which never comes from the primal raising, creation, or from outside. 2:22. If those who lead you in a delusional belief in a god or tin gods then cut themselves off from you, then you are helpless as motherless lambs, because all your bonds have been cut to your leaders who keep you in the servitude bondage of belief. 2:23. And you who follow your false leaders of an untrue truth, in belief in a god or tin gods, You are afraid of turning back to the truth because you believe that you would deny your own God or 10 gods as you are denying the real truth. However, if you turn around and turn yourselves towards the truth, then you will recognize the truth of origination, creation, and its works. Therefore, you would free yourselves from your anguish and from the fire of self-punishment. 224. Eat of everything that serves you as food on earth, fruits, vegetables, and meat, of every fruit and every berry, of all herbs and of all animals and creatures of every kind, and of everything that tastes good to you, because nothing is banned, forbidden. Rather, everything is allowed to you that tastes good to you and is not poisonous to you. If, however, someone forbids you from doing this, then they are not doing rightfully, are your obvious enemy, and are contradicting the laws of origination, creation, and the truth teaching. They only bid you to do evil and disgraceful things, which contradict the laws of the primal wellspring, creation, and that you speak ill of the truth and of things that you do not know. 225. And all of those amongst you who are knowing in real truth, eat of all good things that are given to you through the laws of formation, creation, and of appearance, nature, on earth. Be thankful for everything that you receive, because the goodness and the benevolence of the creative creation and of the appearance, nature, created by it are vast and without end. 226. You shall only be prohibited from nourishing yourselves with things that have themselves perished and are rotten and therefore are inedible. Given to you are all edible and non-poisonous fruits and vegetables, all fermented juices, alcohol such as wine, beer, spirits, etc., and all the meat of all animals and other creatures from which you wish to eat, from the small rodent, from the rabbit, the goat, the sheep and the pig, cattle, the horse and the camel, and everything that tastes good to you, but always in a tolerable and healthy quantity, without gorging or gluttony. The animals and other creatures, rodents, rabbits, goats and sheep, pigs and cattle, horses and camels, and everything that is edible may appear unclean externally because they live in dirt, but on the inside they are clean and good. Therefore they may serve as nourishment once the outside is cleaned of dirt. Also the blood of the animals and other creatures may serve as nourishment in some cases, and the fermented juice, alcohol such as wine, beer, spirits, etc., shall only be enjoyed in a small measure, so that no drunkenness obscures the senses. Therefore the measure shall not be exceeded in any things, and obedience shall be practiced in all things, so that all nourishment serves the bodily good and health. 227. And if it is said to you that you shall follow the teaching of the prophets, then you do not want to follow the call, and say that you want to hurry after what was found existing since time immemorial in the belief in divinities and 10 gods. However, as your talk is like this, even your fathers and mothers did not have any intellect and did not walk on the right way. 228. And those who are unknowing and have fallen into iniquity, unfairness, irresponsibility, are like a man who is calling to something that cannot hear and cannot see anything, is deaf, blind, and dumb, and does not perceive any call or any cry. 229. Those amongst you who falsify and deny any part whatsoever of what is given through the laws of the creative creation, and of the teaching of the true prophets and their truthfully writings, and those who accept the slander, calumny, in exchange for a miserable price, they are filling their admonishment conscience with nothing but fire that devours them inwardly and makes them loveless, inequitable, unfair, unknowing, unfree, unpeaceful, and unharmonious. They cannot cleanse their admonishment, conscience, and they impose a great inner punishment on themselves because they are the ones who barter for an erroneous assumption, and they do not know how great is their underestimation of the burning fire of their admonishment, conscience. 230. The proclaimers, the prophets, have indeed brought the writing of the real truth, but nevertheless it is certain that you are at odds with the word and the writing of the proclaimers, the prophets. You have gone far in enmity and curse and slay the proclaimers, the prophets, who are bringing you the truth teaching and a true life. 231. Equitableness, fairness, is not a matter of you turning your face, eyes to the east, west, south, or north and knowing a lot about the world, but only the one who accepts the real truth, the truth of the creative creation, and its existence in reality, its laws and recommendations, and all its inexhaustible works truly lives in equitableness, fairness, and equitableness, fairness, consists in learning the writing of the proclaimers, the prophets, and leading one's present existence in accordance with their truth, in love, peace, and freedom, and in consonance, harmony. And equitableness, fairness, consists in giving your surplus gains to the needy and to orphans as well as to wayfarers and all those who are obliged to request a charitable donation, or to those who are prisoners and who are starving. And equitableness, fairness, is rewarding those who keep their promises and do not break their word when they have given their word. And equitableness, fairness, is helping those who are patient in their poverty and affliction, as well as those who are steadfast in the truth in times of battle, times of war, so that they may honestly prove themselves and no longer become thieves, deceivers, murderers, and the like, and not turn to a god or 10 gods in anxiety and fear. 232. Through your belief in gods and 10 gods which demand blood, revenge, and punishment from you, you believe that a right measure of revenge and retaliation has been decreed for you, and that you shall shed blood and destroy life for those killed, murdered, for adultery and theft and deception, as well as for many other things, just as the gods and 10 gods you have invented command you. Therefore it is only revenge and retaliation which you yourselves have invented that is meted out on the fallible ones. Indeed, however, the creative creation did not issue any such law that a misdeed or bad deed shall be punished by revenge and retaliation involving harming the body or taking the life, because the creative creation gave the recommendation that you shall not kill in Ausartung. Do not kill out of revenge and retaliation, as a punishment, out of hatred or jealousy, and also not through robbery, fury and anger, out of greed and avarice, and many more besides, because it belongs to Ausartung and goes against the creationally given laws, and is not worthy of the people of your kind, human beings. 233. But you believe in divinities and 10 gods to which you have assigned false and delusional mights and claims, as well as the instruction and demand for revenge and retaliation and punishment. So retaliation shall be practiced in right measure by free ones for the free, by slaves for the slaves, by woman for the woman, and by man for the man. But this is lies and deception, because no law and no recommendation of the creation demands such a thing, but the opposite, punishment for misdeeds and bad deeds shall only be given in accordance with the laws and recommendations of the primal power, creation, which are given in such a wise that no matter how fallible anyone is, they shall not be harmed in life or limb. So every misdeed, fallibility, and bad deed of any type shall be punished in love and humanity, so that every fallible one, every child, every woman, and every man may draw a good lesson from it, and turn to the better and good, so that reintegration into the people's society may be once again possible when the conditions are good for it. If reintegration into the people's society is not possible because the criminal or murderous sense of the fallible ones does not change, and no rationality and no love can be brought forth, as well as no peace and no concord, harmony, then the fallible ones shall be separated from the people's society for their lifetime and brought to a place of fulfillment of guidelines, place of execution of punishment equals island, secluded area, etc., where they are imprisoned and live in freedom within the confines and learn, and are provided with all the necessary things for their present existence. Places of fulfillment of guidelines shall be secluded areas and islands from which the guilty ones cannot get back to unconfined freedom, but must remain where they are. 234. Be at all times lenient and forgiving in accordance with equitableness, fairness, responsibility, moderate. So it is, if anything is decreed on one by his or her next one, or by authority, or by the court, then the demand for atonement shall be made with justification, and the fallible one shall be taken for punishment through an equitable, fair, appropriate conviction, although neither life nor limb is allowed to be harmed. The laws and recommendations of the creation are explained so that everyone may learn from everything and promote their knowledge and their wisdom so that they may become good and follow the laws and recommendations of the love and of the creation for their own benefit and to the weal of all, and create everything to the best in themselves. Only those who contravene these laws and recommendations of the creation commit an outrage against them and against the truth of the life and against everything that is rightful. And whoever puts themselves in the unright and commits an outrage against the truth will meet a painful punishment in themselves through lovelessness, discord, unfreedom, unpeace, and inequality, disharmony, as well as many things that have a negative sense and wrong value. 235. There is no value in your life in retaliation and revenge, because through retaliation and revenge you turn yourselves into guilty ones and fallible ones. Therefore your acts of retaliation and your desires for revenge must also be punished. 236. And you shall practice equitableness, being fairness, in all things. So you also have to observe equitableness, fairness between man and woman, because both of you shall be equal and none given precedence. Therefore the same rights apply to woman as to man. The woman shall not be subservient to the man, and vice versa. Therefore the man shall not use the woman and her womb in salaciousness and selfishness for fulfilling his own pleasure like a field which is plowed and sown at will, for one's own enjoyment. The same right shall prevail amongst and between both sexes also during sexual intercourse. Therefore equality in all things applies to man and woman, just as an equivalent value is given to both in the conjoining of bodies in order to beget offspring, or for the stimulating and joyful and joining and healing fulfillment of pleasure. 237. And as you shall practice equitableness, being fairness in all things, so also practice equitableness, being fair, to your children, because they are no less inferior than you. Therefore you shall treat them as people of your kind, human beings, just as you treat those who are no longer young, are grown-ups, and are not children anymore. 238. And as you shall practice equitableness, being fairness, in all things, so think about your life and your death, because after your birth both are unavoidable for you, so that you must ponder them and find the way to both in calm and peace. Therefore practice equitableness, fairness, on your descendants and relatives, because when the time comes for you to depart from life, you shall have settled everything, so that all your left-behind chattels and your wealth may be distributed in equitableness, fairness. But you few who are able to write, prepare a text with instructions on how and to whom your heritable goods, chattels, and wealth shall be handed over in whichever particular amounts. If you are, however, unable to write, then announce your last will to a scribe so that he can record everything in writing, which is your final decision. If you leave anything behind, then make a writing testament before you lay yourself down close to death, and make the writing testament for man, woman, and child, for the parents and close relatives, or for friends, and for whatever you wish, in order to act in equitableness, recognition, approval, fairness. When you make the writing testament, or have it made, then act in equitableness, fairness, and do not cheat any of those who remain behind, so that no discord, bad blood, and strife, or even worse, may flare up. And those who remain behind shall not fall prey to avarice, and not call on the jurisdictions to break the last will of the deceased for their own benefits. And the survivors of the deceased shall not be at odds with one another and quarrel over the wealth and chattels, because such doings are not worthy of people of your kind, human beings, and are only done by ones without equitableness, unfair ones, irresponsible ones without fairness, and unknowing ones who are reviled by the people as scum. 239. And as you shall practice equitableness, fairness in all things, so also practice equitableness, fairness, in that you do not steal, destroy, or falsify any writing testament that a human being has left behind after his or her death in order to settle everything. Anyone who does this is committing an outrage against themselves and the truth and his or her fellow human beings, and there is never any boon from it. And those who do it will truly have a heavy guilt placed on them, which they will find difficult to bear. 240. Truly, however, those who practice equitableness, fairness, and fear that the one who has prepared or had prepared his or her writing testament for after his or her dying, and therefore for his or her goods and chattels and wealth for the survivors, has created partiality or inequity for the survivors through his or her writing testament, that human being shall confront the human being who produced the writing testament and reveal the correct way to him or her. And if survivors fall into enmity due to partiality and inequity of the deceased and his or her writing testament, then rational people shall bring about peace between those affected, so that they will be forgiving and compassionate to one another. 241. You believe that fasting is prescribed for you, and it is maintained that fasting was already prescribed for those who have gone before you. But this is by no means the truth, because it has been from time immemorial only a discourse by those without equitableness, unfair ones, irresponsible ones, inequitable ones, so that you would remain with your God or tin God through your belief. 242. Truly, fasting is no law, although it is a recommendation which serves your health and the well-being of your body, so that you do not practice gorging and gluttony and satisfy yourselves with a good measure. Therefore, according to your own discretion, take a number of days determined by yourselves during which you only consume moderate nourishment once a day. However, whoever is ill, and those who would have difficulty in withstanding the fast shall refrain from doing so, and do it if it is necessary for them. And fasting does not apply to children and those hungering in misery, because they require nourishment and cannot do without it. Therefore let children and those hungering in misery eat in voluntary observance of the laws and recommendations of the primal power, creation, and do a good work for them. And fasting is good for you, if you wish to understand it, for your health, for your body and everything that is within it, as well as for your discipline and taming. 243. And there shall not be any particular time for fasting, but it is a recommendation given guidance to you, that fasting shall be performed when the requirement or health stand behind it. Therefore they apply as proof of direction and differentiation according to which fasting shall be performed. Whoever has the want for fasting, or because his or her health demands it, or because it is given, for whatever reason, he or she may fast for a predetermined time, depending on his or her own free will or the instruction given by someone versed in medicine. However, whoever is suffering from an illness shall not take part in fasting, or only do so according to the instruction of someone versed in medicine. Therefore wish to make it easy and not difficult for yourselves, and perform fasting according to the necessary extent, so that you are rightly led and that you may be thankful for it. 244. And if you are asked about the reason for fasting by the unknowing ones, then say that it is a matter of your health, and tell the questioner or the requester that they shall listen to the guidance of the recommendations for fasting and be knowing in them, so that they may walk the right way. 245. Also in the time of fasting, it is permitted for you to go into your woman or your man if you are rightful in your bond with one another, connected to one another. Therefore do not act in inequity, unfairness, irresponsibility against yourselves, but be kind-hearted and practice equitableness, fairness on yourselves, and grant yourselves easement in your union with one another. Therefore you may go into one another also during the time of fasting, and strive for what is sufficient for your good, and eat and drink during the time of fasting in an appropriate minimum extent, so that you will not be prevented from fasting due to great hunger. And when you complete your fasting, then the day may return to its given course, although you should restrict the amount of nourishment, so that you do not suffer any injury. These are the limits that are given by the recommendations, so that you do not exceed them, and accept them, so that you will be protected against everything that harms your health and well-being and brings you evil. 246. And do not devour your wealth amongst one another through falseness and lying and deception, and not through greed and stinginess. And do not offer your wealth for bribery, not to those without equitableness, unfair ones, irresponsible ones, inequitable ones, and not to authority, in order to be granted advantages and right while in the unright, because thereby you knowingly, consciously wish to devour parts of the wealth of the other people. Live at all times in equitableness, fairness, responsibility, and honestly, and do not dare to commit misdeeds in order thereby to increase your wealth by striving to swindle the wealth of others through unright. 247. As you are the ones living in equitableness, fairness, responsibility, uphold righteousness, conscientiousness, so that you do not enter the houses of your next ones from behind as thieves. Respect the house and the right and the wealth of your next ones, so that you do not covet your next one's goods and chattels, just as you do not covet the wife of your next one or the husband of your next one. Therefore, you shall enter the houses through the doors that are open to you, so that you may enter honestly and be welcome. And therefore take heed of this, and respect your next one's goods and chattels and wealth, and honor your next one's wife and your next one's husband, so that you will always be received in a friendly wise and be honored guests. Be fearful of the unright, so that it may go well with you. 248. And if you are asked about the purpose of the moon and the stars in the firmament, then teach that the moon helps to determine that on earth, which makes possible the tides of the seas and the changes of the weather by which everything thrives and lives well. 249. And if you enter into a bond between man and woman, then both shall have the capabilities for doing so, and each party shall have sufficient goods and chattels and wealth to bring into the bond as male and female dowry, as is given in accordance with possibility. However, no purchase price shall be paid for a woman or for a man, because neither the one nor the other is a commodity. 250. And if your bond of marriage is broken, then separate in honor and do not quarrel. Rather divide your goods and chattels and your wealth fairly in accordance with the earnings as acquired by the woman and the man, so that the share falls to each party as he or she has worked for, and may he or she be satisfied with it. If one has more than the other, then the one who owns more may give to the other at his or her discretion. It shall not be the case that authority or jurisdiction shall make assessments for a settlement and indemnity, and the like if woman and man exercise equality and equitableness, fairness. Therefore, jurisdiction or authority shall only make an assessment if a decision has to be reached in a dispute, because man and woman are free in their bond, and also in setting the line about what shall be. 251. And if a bond of marriage is broken, then a letter of separation shall be written, both by the woman and by the man, so that it is set down in writing that both parties are no longer in a bond, and are free and unmarried, and can go their own way. And both man and woman have the same duties and rights in the dissolution of the bond, so that neither the man nor the woman is to be favored. And goods and chattels, as well as possessions and wealth acquired jointly by the man and woman before and during the bond of marriage shall be allocated half to the man and half to the woman in honesty and equitableness, fairness. If there is a dispute between the man and woman about the allocation when the bond is canceled, and if they cannot jointly find the way to this, then jurisdiction or the authority shall decide based on precise documentary evidence, and also clarify the situation in terms of goods and chattels, possessions and wealth, in order to reach a wise decision on this, and to do rightfully, so that each party receives the share according to his or her earnings or what they contributed as a dowry. So neither the woman nor the man is cheated. The dowry contributed by the woman belongs to her, and the dowry contributed by the man belongs to him, both during the bond and also when a termination of the bond is completed. Therefore it shall also be the case that after a termination of the bond of marriage the woman and the man go their own ways, and also that the woman is not responsible for paying for the maintenance of the man, nor the man for the maintenance of the woman, because after separation from bed and board each party is responsible for providing for their own living and their own maintenance, so that equality and equitableness, fairness, may prevail. 252. And if a bond of marriage is broken, then neither the woman nor the man shall be preferred in law if jurisdiction or the authority must decide on the breakup of the bond. Rather, both parties shall be subject to the same duty and the same right. It is given, if the bond breaks up, that the children shall not be allocated either to the woman or the man alone for their upbringing and their welfare. Rather, it shall be that a regulated reciprocity shall exist, so that the children stay alternately for a number of days with the mother and a number of days with the father, so that the children are not torn in themselves and do not develop any extraneousness towards one parent, and both parents are responsible for the children. Therefore it shall be given that the children are brought up by both parents, and also that not one parent alone, but both parents, namely mother and father, shall contribute equally to the welfare of the children. If one of the parents can be proved to be doubtful or incapable in all things relating to the upbringing and care of the children, then the other parent shall take them into his or her charge, and bring them up and provide them with everything necessary. But it is given that they shall not be withheld from the other parent, so that the parental duty can be discharged. And in case of any malicious violation of this, then the fallible parent shall be rebuked by the authority or jurisdiction and subjected to a stern punishment. If both parents can be proved to be incapable of bringing up their children and supplying them with everything that they require, then a decision shall be reached that they shall live in a suitable place similar to where orphans live, so that they can receive a good upbringing, love, and support. Children are not the property of their parents, because they are in their nature free people of your kind, human beings, with their own thoughts and feelings as well as with the right to decide of their own free will. 253. And if a bond of marriage is broken and a letter of separation is issued, then the woman shall abstain from sexual relations with another man for 10 months, waiting for the monthly menstruation, so that no concealed pregnancy or offspring may become a burden, and an obligation on another man. And if a man and woman separate from one another and nevertheless live under the same roof, and the woman approaches the end of her waiting period of 10 months of monthly menstruation, then she may remain in a decorous wise under the same roof in accordance with her volition and that of the separated man. Or in a decorous wise she shall leave the place and go her own way. And this depends on whose property the house is and how the separated man or woman have decided between themselves on where to stay. But neither woman nor man may remain in the house contrary to right, so that they do not commit any brutality against one another. And if they behave in correctness, then truly neither the man nor woman need to carry any burden and guilt. Therefore do not mock these recommendations, and think of your honor and dignity at all times which you can carry or may lose. Consider the recommendations in wisdom, and admonish yourselves always to comply with them. 254. And if you have separated from one another as man and woman, then you shall not presume to revile the other party, slander them, or do anything bad to them. Therefore you shall also not prevent the separated woman or the separated man from entering into another bond of marriage if the woman or man has agreed with another man or woman in a decorous wise. Truly, this recommendation is also an admonition that it will be more beneficial and more understandable for you when you follow this guideline, signposting leading thought. 255. And if an honorable woman becomes pregnant and bears offspring, then she shall be given all honor and rights of motherhood, and shall be respected, and the child shall enjoy a good upbringing and nourishment. And no evil is to be done to any woman or any ignominy heaped upon her for what has been created in her womb. And it shall be that the creators of her fruit admit and honor and undertake all duties by participating in the education and nourishment and welfare. 256. And if a bond of marriage is broken and a letter of separation issued, and the man and woman find themselves together again in reconciliation, then they shall be permitted to take one another back and enter into a new bond of marriage with one another. 257. And women have the same rights as men have in equitableness, recognition, approval, fairness. Therefore men have no preeminence over women. 258. If a separation between man and woman has been pronounced and a letter of separation given, then they may join together again and contract a new bond of marriage. This shall not happen more than twice, because it is not permitted 3 times, since this proves that the relationship of marriage and the human bond between the two cannot be maintained and gives rise to discord. Therefore the man and woman discharge one another from the bonds of marriage in a decorous wise and in kindheartedness, and give one another the letter of separation, so that the bond may not be concluded between the pair on another occasion. 259. And if a separation has been pronounced between a man and woman, then it is not permitted for the man to demand back from the woman, or for the woman to demand back from the man anything that had been given to her or him during the course of the bond of marriage, unless the woman herself or the man himself wishes to give something back that was given to her or him. Therefore it is given that these imposed barriers shall be observed, although the purpose is not in order to gain freedom, because nothing shall be given to get it. Therefore these barriers shall not be overstepped, so that you will not be without equitableness, unfair ones, irresponsible ones, inequitable ones, and do not fall under the responsibility of the other. 260. Just as children are no property of the parents, so no person of your kind, human being, is the property of another. Therefore servitude, bondage, and slavery amongst people of your kind, human beings, contravene the honor and dignity of people of your kind, human beings, and infringe the laws and recommendations of the primal power, creation, and go against love, freedom, peace, and concord, harmony, which have incontrovertible value as the basic principle of the existence and contain both equitableness, fairness, and dignity for people of your kind, humanity. 261. A bond of marriage shall apply in every case when a woman and a man come together for forming a line, family, and it makes no difference whether the bond is concluded between the man and woman by their own volition, endeavor, and decision, or by an assessment and conclusion through the authority, marriage performed by them. And in the bond of marriage, the woman and man shall be joined together in all things with the same duties and rights. 262. And it is not permitted that parents promise their children to other children in a bond of marriage at an earlier or later date. And it is not permitted for parents to force their children through gevalt and compulsion into concluding a bond of marriage, because woman and man are free to determine, make decisions, and are free in their opinion and inclination as to entering a bond of marriage. And it is also not permitted for siblings to force their siblings into a bond of marriage through gevalt and compulsion, if this is not in accordance with the free volition of the pressed sibling. And it is not permitted for relations or non-relations to force a woman or a man into a marital bond in any wise. Therefore, it is also not permitted for children to enter into a marital bond with one another before the time when they have grown out of childhood and have therefore reached their full swelling, growth adulthood. And it is not permitted for a woman or a man to be purchased in order to enter a bond of marriage. 263. And neither a man nor a woman shall be married, no matter how much they may like one another, if they curse the truth of the laws of the primal power, creation, the teaching of the truth, the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of the life, because they are not merely unknowing ones in the truth, but are ones without equitableness, unfair ones, irresponsible ones, inequitable ones, who are wallowing in falsehood, practicing evil, and conducting their life in Ausartung, even an unknowing woman in the truth or an unknowing man in the truth is better than those who curse the truth. If you marry someone who curses the truth, then you will have no joy with them, find no well-being and no love, as well as no comfort and no peace, and neither freedom nor consonance, harmony, but only maliciousness and strife, as well as discord and affliction. Those who curse the real truth call to the fire of Ausartung and destruction. Therefore, through them, there can be no ongoing existence of a bond of marriage. Therefore, know what a woman and a man are reflecting and striving for, so that a wise decision may be taken about them. 264. And if you marry believers who attach themselves to gods or tin gods, then protect yourselves from their belief, so that you do not fall into the same water in which the belief in their gods or tin gods is swimming. 265. And if a woman is having a monthly cleansing menstruation, then the man shall not go to the woman, but stay away from her womb throughout the days of cleansing and for 2 days thereafter, until she is once again clean. When the woman is once again cleansed, then the man may go to her again, as is given to you as a duty and a source of enjoyment. And all those who keep to the recommendation live in rationality and in equitableness, fairness, because they're the ones who keep themselves clean. 266. The woman is not the man's property of sensuality, sexuality, which he may approach when and how he will, because the woman's volition and need are preconditions in order to complete the sexual intercourse. Therefore, a willing mutuality shall be given, so that the woman and man share the same volition, so that no compulsion is exerted. And if woman and man sleep together willingly, then it shall be given that love and goodness are granted in advance, so that both may meet one another in dignity and love, and fulfill their act of love in the same wise. 267. And a bond of purely same-gender concordance, partnership, is permitted, thus between woman and between man and man, so that they live together in communality with equal rights in all things. However, the bond between man and man shall be such that they do not change their appearance, nature, in order to be able to bear children, so that they do not violate the laws and the regulation of the primal power, creation. And in same-gender concordance between partners, it is permitted for sensuality, sexual doings, to take place as with heterosexual concordance. 268. And it is permitted to the woman as well as to the man to bestow pleasure, satisfaction, i.e. self-gratification, on her or his own sexual organ, because it is in the appearance, nature, of the two, and it does not infringe the laws of the primal power, creation, to do such. 269. And the sexual misuse of children is a serious outrage and a shameful act against the children and the laws of the primal power, creation. Therefore, such an act is to be condemned with hard punishment of the execution of fulfillment of guidelines, a separation of men or separation of women, banishment and exclusion from the people's society, separated by gender, and with dishonor for the necessary time. 270. And if you beget offspring, then first consider whether you have the capability and possibility to bring up and feed children truly rightfully. And so it shall be that no illnesses are present for the offspring which they can inherit. Therefore it shall not be permitted for deracinated, asocial ones, and enemies of people, enemies of society, to have offspring, nor shall it be permitted to those who use Goblet and those who threaten the life and safety of the people, terrorists, etc. Also those who are incapable of bringing up and nourishing children, as well as those who are confused and sick in their inner world consciousness, and in their psyche, as well as those with inherited illnesses, and those addicted to fermented juices and medicines and intoxicants, drugs or narcotics, shall not be allowed to beget offspring. Offspring shall only be permitted in the number of 3 per woman and in one marital bond. Therefore, the number of 3 offspring per woman also applies if a former bond has been dissolved and the letter of separation given, and if then a new bond is entered into. If a woman already has 1 child from a previous marital bond, then the number of 2 offspring shall not be exceeded in a further bond, so that the number of 3 children applies per woman. 271. And the recommendation is given that mothers must nourish their children, infants, at their breast for 2 years, so that the children receive all the necessary nourishment for their health and survival throughout their entire life, because the mother's nourishment is of great importance. And the begetto of the child shall be obliged to provide for the child's mother and the child's nourishment and clothing in accordance with the customs and habits of the people in question. However, the father of the child shall not be imposed upon beyond his ability, so that he can carry out his duty in honor and dignity. Therefore the child's mother shall not allow the father to suffer, nor her child, nor shall the child's father allow the mother and the child to suffer. And the same thing applies to the godparents and the siblings and relatives or other wardens and the heirs. 272. If the mother and father decide for whatever reasons in joint agreement regarding the health of the child or of the mother, and following good advice that the child shall be weaned off the mother's breast, then that is their concern and no reproach shall be offered. And if the mother is unable to nourish her child at her own breast, then a wet nurse may be taken for breastfeeding the child. But the wet nurse must receive an agreed-upon payment in accordance with equitableness, fairness. 273. And if the man or the woman dies during the bond of marriage, then the sadness and sorrow shall be dealt with in dignity, and the deceased man or woman remembered in honor. The sorrowing shall not be unconsidered, and not in such a wise as to bring forth any illness in the inner world, consciousness, or the psyche. Therefore the mourning shall also not last too long, but be guided by objectivity and comprehension. And honor and dignity shall be borne, so that the surviving partner does not practice any self-gratification or sexuality for a period of time to be determined by herself or himself, in order to guard herself or himself against regret and shame. However, once the period of self-imposed abstinence has expired, then the surviving woman or the surviving man may do whatever she or he likes with herself or himself in accordance with equitableness, their own approval fairness, without burdening herself or himself with pangs of conscience for anything. 274. And it shall be a matter of decency and honor and respect that the surviving man or the surviving woman waits 24 months before contracting another bond of marriage. However, it is not beneath dignity and honor and respect to think about another woman or another man during the 24 months and to maintain a friendship with him or her with the intention of entering into a bond of marriage. However, during the waiting time of decency and honor and respect, do not secretly conclude an agreement for a bond of marriage, because this is not seemly. If you do this, however, then you are putting yourselves in ignominy and disrepute. Therefore do not decide on a bond of marriage before expiry of the bidden time, so that you will stand in honor and dignity before the people of your kind, human beings. Therefore you shall think about guarding yourselves against contravening the recommendation. Then know whatever you do and omit the ones without equitableness, unfair ones, irresponsible ones, inequitable ones, and the unknowing ones in the truth are not forgiving and not forbearing. 275. It will not be counted against you if you separate the man from his woman and the woman from her man, if you do not consummate rightfully, not sexually unified, and do not touch one another. But if you do not separate because of this and therefore stay together, then you shall remain in honor and dignity of one another, and take care for one another in all things. And you shall take care in accordance with the extent of your wealth, the rich according to their kind, and the poor according to their kind. This makes the support as it should be, and this is the duty of the righteous ones, conscientious ones. 276. And if you separate before you have touched one another, but after you have jointly created something and have amassed wealth together, then both the woman and the man shall have half of what has been accumulated, and therefore the goods and chattels, and the ownership and the wealth. But that which the woman or the man brought into the bond of marriage as a dowry shall remain their personal and undisputed property, unless the woman or the man voluntarily surrenders her or his own dowry in whole or in part in favor of the other party. Always remain close to righteousness, conscientiousness, in your decrees, instructions, and regulations, and do not forget to do one another true good, even if you have separated from one another. 277. And those of you who die and leave a woman or a man behind shall take care during your life, so that the surviving partner, the woman or the man, will be provided for, money, wealth, in new times also a pension, for a long time, so that the requirement for life and housing will be secured. They shall, however, not be rebuked if they want to bear the responsibility for providing for themselves, and therefore make arrangements for themselves, if they do this in accordance with equitableness, their own discretion and fairness, and power. 278. And those who have separated from the bond of marriage shall not be provided with any support, because each one goes their own way, woman and man. Therefore they are responsible for their own upkeep in the entire extent, scope, and neither the man shall pay for the upkeep of the woman, nor the woman for the upkeep of the man. If children have come forth from the bond of marriage, then the separated persons are equally obligated to pay for the upkeep of the children. Therefore the mother by half and the father by half, because in no case shall only the mother or the father be responsible for the living costs and upkeep of the children, by means of which one parent would obtain benefits and advantages from the other. And if the mother or the father refuses to pay her or his half of the support for the children, then the legal process shall demand an accounting and half of the support for the children from the fallible mother or the fallible father. And if the fallible mother or the fallible father refuses nevertheless to uphold her or his duty, then the punishment shall be the fulfillment of guidelines in isolation from the people, society, until the children have grown up to adulthood, and the fallible one, who acted in this wise, shall be paid for the work they will have to provide to the extent that half of the support for the children is assumed, and their pay shall be given to the parent who is in charge of the children's upbringing and upkeep. And the children shall spend a certain number of days with the mother and a certain number of days with the father for their upbringing and upkeep, because the children shall not be split between the parents in such a wise that any rejection, growing apart, results. Therefore man and woman shall go their own ways in the separation, divorce, of their bond of marriage, and be responsible for their own upkeep to the full extent, scope, and accordingly, half the upkeep of the children, so that neither party, woman or man, suffers disadvantages from the man paying to support the woman or the woman paying to support the man. Because even when the bond of marriage has been separated, man and woman have the same duties and rights, both as man and woman and as mother and father. 279. Truly the prophets gave you and give you recommendations as they are given for the equality of all people of your kind, human beings, and for the equivalence and the rights of the woman and the man and the children, so that you may understand it. 280. Truly, you have received life through the laws of origination, creation, and through its works, but you disregard the laws and recommendations of origination, creation, as you also disregard the teaching of the proclaimers, the prophets, and revile them, and do not give them any thanks, although they are fighting for the truth and for your well-being, because they are knowing and wise and bring you their love. But you do not want to be knowing, and you threaten them with death despite the fact that they teach you. So you shall lead a better and an equitable, fair, responsible life. 281. Truly, there is scarcely a single one amongst you who would give a prophet a goodly gesture of appreciation, give consent, so that he could increase knowledge with further knowledge. Truly, you belittle the prophet's knowledge of the truth and increase your unknowledge, so you do not find the truth. But search for the real truth and fight for it in a peaceful wise once you have found it. 282. Fight in a peaceful and gavolt-less wise for the truth of formation, creation, and its laws and recommendations against those who fight you and the real truth. But in doing this, do not exceed the bounds of goodness and equitableness, fairness, responsibility, so that you do not fall into acts of gavolt, because lack of restraint and gavolt are not liked by the people of your kind, human beings. 283. Be at all times peaceful to those who believe themselves to be your enemies, who fight you and drive you from one place to another. And love those who call themselves your enemies for the sake of their dignification, being human in the real and true sense, as people of your kind, and do not hate them because of their bad deeds, but only assess their bad deeds and do not make assessments about the people of your kind, human beings. As people of your kind, human beings, and wherever you meet any who give themselves as your enemies, then do not deem them to be enemies on your own account either. Do not kill, murder them, or drive them away, but offer them the hand of peace and create friendship between you and them. Therefore do not pursue those who believe themselves to be your enemies either in order to mete out evil revenge and retaliation on them, because persecution and revenge and retaliation are as bad as manslaughter. If your self-appointed enemies attack you, then fight against them with Gewaltsame, Gewaltlosigkeit, with words and deeds, but you shall not kill an Ausartung but only if there is an inescapable danger to your life, so that you only kill in defense and extremis, self-defense, when your life is threatened. When, however, the ones who believe they are your enemies let go of you, then show them benevolence, humanity, and forgiveness, so that there will be peace between you. 284. Only fight against your self-appointed enemies with the means of knowledge and peace until their persecution of you ceases, and they allow rationality in themselves. And when they cease their persecution of you and turn to you in peace, then know that you shall not show any hostility to them, just as you shall not harbor any hostility towards the unknowing ones and those who are without equitableness, unfair ones, irresponsible ones, inequitable ones. 285. If the ones who call themselves your enemies or those without equitableness, unfair ones, irresponsible ones, inequitable ones, or unknowing ones defile your honor and dignity and your righteousness, conscientiousness, through lying and deception and slander, calumny, then their action shall not be retributed by you with lovelessness and hatred or with revenge and other evil. In all laws of the formation, creation, and the appearance, nature, there are no laws of retaliation and revenge, neither of hatred nor other evil. 286. If those who call themselves your enemies as well as unknowing ones, or those without equitableness, unfair ones, irresponsible ones, inequitable ones, commit brutality, then do not punish them with hostility or hatred and revenge or retaliation and other evil, but practice equitableness, be fairness, and strive for forgiveness, and know that equitableness, fairness, is with those who nourish it. If a fallible human being commits brutality against you in any wise, and you cannot defend yourselves against it through rationality and equitableness, being fair, then do not administer punishment yourselves through self-justice. Rather call on the authority or jurisdiction, so that the matter and the things will be clarified by them, and the fallible ones judge in accordance with equitableness, fairness, and the dignification of people of your kind, humanity, as is appropriate for the offense committed against you. 287. Give donations as often as you can and are able for the sake of the truth, the teaching of the truth, the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of the life, so that the teaching of the truth concerning the primal wellspring, creation, and its laws and recommendations spread themselves. But in spreading the teaching, do not cast yourselves into ruin by your own hand. Therefore do not donate more than your power and your wealth permit. Do good at all times, and do not undertake commerce with the truth teaching, just as you shall also not proclaim it at the top of your voice, and not attack and make enemies of unknowing ones and believers in gods, and tin gods with the teaching, and as you also shall not try to proselytize them. 288. And for the sake of the truth, always carry out everything in honesty and equitableness, fairness, and instruct, teach your next ones without encouraging and without coercing them in the words of the truth and in the laws and recommendations of the primal wellspring, creation, so that they may also learn and be in agreement with them in order to live in equitableness, to be fair, to live in fairness, and to lead a good life. 289. And it is taught to you that you shall not shear your head because of a belief in a god or tin gods, or for the sake of a false teacher who demands such from you in false truth. And you shall not circumcise your sexual organ because of a belief in a god or tin gods, or for the sake of a false teacher, unless it is necessary because of health. But it is said to you through the true proclaimers, the true prophets, that you shall clean your sexual organ every day as a matter of course, because Health and cleanliness demand it. And therefore clean your sexual organ after every connection, sexual intercourse. And cover your head from the sun, because its fiery beam, ray, is full of danger and brings forth injury. And this recommendation applies both to woman and man. And therefore it applies to man and woman that you must cover your face with a cloth when the fiery glow radiation is very strong, or if impurities and dust are filling the air. Otherwise you may suffer from it. 290. Do not quarrel with people of your kind, fellow human beings, or with those without equitableness, unfair ones, irresponsible ones, inequitable ones, and not with unknowing ones, and therefore not with believers regarding the real truth, because it is given by the laws and recommendations of the primal power, creation, and they are immutable. Only the wellspring of wisdom, creation, is the true might over you and the unmeasurable secret, and you shall not have either other mights or gods and 10 gods or venerable ones, holy ones, beside it. Truly, only the wellspring of wisdom, creation, is the highest over you, and it alone has performed the great works on earths, worlds, planets, and in the firmaments, universe, and only from it have all earths, worlds, planets, and firmaments, universe, and all life originated. In the same wise you also shall carry out your works according to your ability, so that great as greatness and good as goodness may come forth from them. And when doing this, be at all times upright in your efforts, because you shall not be malefactors, lawbreakers. And remember that you shall not misuse the name of the wellspring of wisdom, creation, and that you shall keep it honored. 291. And as you do your works, so you shall make every day a day of festivity, so that you accomplish your deeds in honor, and that you do not fall victim to lowly temptations. Every day you shall do your work in honor, so that you find joy in your doing, and that you remain in equitableness, fairness, so that you do not do the same as those without equitableness, unfair ones, irresponsible ones, inequitable ones, who procure what they need by theft and lying and deception. Therefore may you consider that ill-gotten goods never prosper. 292. Follow equitableness, fairness, responsibility, at all times, and do not break the bond with the wellspring of wisdom, creation, which you shall honor as you honor and love your parents. And therefore you shall also not break the bond of marriage once you have entered into it, because a consummated bond is venerable, a proof controlling, which you shall always be conscious of. 293. And it has been taught you since time immemorial that you shall not commit false witness, perjury, neither against a woman or a man, nor against your next one, and the truth, and also not against life and the wellspring of wisdom, creation. And as you shall not give false witness, perjury, so you shall never speak the untruth, because truly the untruth is always inconstant and pushes to the light of the world, so that every liar fails. The untruth also lies in cursing the truth. Therefore the truth shall not be cursed against, because doing so yields no good fruits and no good reward. 294. And do not dare to misuse the laws and recommendations of the wellspring of wisdom, creation, for worthless cults, for divinities and 10 gods, which are only inventions by people of your kind, human beings. And do not drop down on your knees before those who have raised themselves up to be gods and exalted ones and false teachers and prophets. And do not use the laws and recommendations of the wellspring of wisdom, creation, for hateful speeches, and do not exaggerate them, and make sure that no strife comes from this. Do good from the laws and recommendations of the wellspring of wisdom, creation, and equip yourselves with patience and righteousness, conscientiousness, so that you will always live as ones of intellect. 295. You will not come to any harm if you make use of the fullness of the goodness of the wellspring of wisdom, creation, because its ample grace is given to you amply for all time, so that you may think and act through your own power, and of your own will in all things, both in the false and in the right, and so you may bring yourselves onto the way of the truth. If, however, you hurry away from the benefit of the wellspring of wisdom, creation, then consider that you belong to the ones who have gone astray. 296. And if you carry out acts obligated by the primal wellspring, creation, which are given to you through the laws and recommendations, then you are creating your own glory in yourselves, just as all those living in equitableness, fairness, responsibility, before you created and upheld the same glory, and were able to celebrate in love and peace as well as in freedom and consonance, harmony. 297. Some of those amongst you demand special signs, evidence, for themselves of the truth and the primal wellspring, creation, so that they may believe, but the truth is not belief, nor does the primal wellspring, creation, send special signs, evidence, for the individual who demands them, because truly all existence of all earths, worlds, planets, and firmaments, universe, all animals and other creatures and all people of your kind, human beings, as well as the existence of all life and all stars in the firmaments, universe, are unmeasurable signs, marvels, of the presence of the primal wellspring, creation, and whoever may comprehend it, comprehends it. 298. Never be haughty with your next ones, and live in modesty with everyone and with yourselves. Do not strive for renown and fame, because otherwise you will fall victim to megalomania, selfishness, and wanting to appear to be more than you are, as well as the worship and irrationality performed by others who bow down to pay you homage, glorify you. 299. And whoever amongst you is ill or has a suffering in the head, consciousness, psyche, shall expunge this by obtaining the help of those who are versed in medicine if he or she cannot help himself or herself. But if you are not ill and without suffering, then be thankful and benevolent and give alms, gifts, to those who are ill and full of suffering and who are unable to put themselves in the care of those versed in medicine for healing. 300. If there is a place somewhere where the teaching of the truth, the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of the life is taught in a truthfully wise, then make a journey there and learn the truth teaching, so that you may be knowing ones and equitable ones, fair ones, responsible ones, and no blame will be put on you for doing this. And if you want to make the journey, then you shall think about not conducting any hateful talk, nor permitting yourselves any breach of the laws and recommendations of the creation, and no strife either.